How many years have you been sitting in that pew? 3, 5, 10, 20, 50. How many sermons have you heard? Countless. How many hours of Bible class have you attended? What's the result? How many of us are taking the knowledge, the training that we have, and are going out into the world bearing fruit with it? What's the result? We come here every Sunday. Many of us come here every Wednesday. And we've been coming here most of our entire lives. But what's the result? Are you better? Are you a better husband? Are you a better wife? Are you a better brother, sister? Are you a better supervisor? Are you a better employee? Are you a better Christian? Are you a better son, a better daughter? What's the point? Are you enriching the lives of people? Are you beneficial to the people in the world? Let me smile. The fact that we are alive at this moment, the fact that we have air in our lungs at this moment, is a direct result of God's patience and care for us. We have not been cut down yet. The barren fig tree was in the vineyard, using but not producing. I didn't hear amen. Let me say it again. The barren fig tree was in the vineyard, using but not producing. In other words, it was taking advantage of the resources. I mean, there were other fruit trees that were fruitful. It was just this particular one. So it's taking up space at least. And it's available to all the resources, the same resources as the other fruit trees. But this particular one does not bear fruit. So it's using the resources. It's taking up space, but it's not producing. What about us? What have we produced? Are we sitting just taking up a space on a pew? Or are we producing the fruit that God desires from us? Maturity is asking not what can the church do for me. Maturity is asking how and where can I serve in the church and be of benefit and use to others. Let me move on. Then Jesus says, the vine dresser, he says, leave the tree alone. Don't cut down the tree yet. He says, let me dig around that tree. What's the implication? That the dirt, the soil, was hard, right? So the vine dresser had to influence the environment for the tree to produce fruit. When the soil around the tree is hard, water cannot penetrate the soil to get to the roots of the tree. Right? So the soil has to be broken up. It has to be tilled. It has to be irrigated for the water to get to the tree. How many of us today aren't producing fruit because our hearts are hardened? It is almost impossible to produce fruit with a hardened heart. If your heart is hardened today, guess what? I have a remedy. Number one, recognize, process, and replace your uncomfortable feelings or emotions. Don't get comfortable and complacent in these feelings. When your heart is hardened, there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of resentment. There's a lot of bitterness. There's a lot of hostility. There's a lot of hatred in your heart. And it's impossible to be a benefit to other people when these emotions consume you from day to day. Recognize them and replace them with more favorable, beneficial emotions like empathy. How about forgiveness? How about grace, mercy, patience, kindness? Number 2, identify and work through any past trauma. A lot of times our hearts become hardened because of the things that we've experienced in our life. When we've been through something traumatic, it really makes trusting difficult. It really makes living life difficult. So I encourage you, find a way to identify the trauma in your life, and if it means going to a therapist, do so that your heart can be softened, ready to receive God's word. Number 3, remove yourself from toxic relationships and reestablish relationships with those who respect and value and accept you. If you're always in a toxic relationship, your heart is going to be hardened. Because you're going to be distrustful of people. You're always going to be on guard. You're going to be in a constant fight or flight mentality. How can you produce fruit when you're just trying to survive a relationship? You can't. Remove yourself from toxic people. Get around people who love you unconditionally. Fellowship with people who accept you, who validate you, who want to hear you, spend time with you, who encourage you, support you. Amen? Amen? Number 4, allow God to work in you. Submit to his process. He wants to transform us inwardly. In order for that to happen, you have to break up the soil. You have to let Jesus do his work. And I don't know about you, but breaking up soil doesn't sound like a fun process for either party. And then serve. Serve, serve, serve. Be of benefit to others. Jesus says it is more blessed to give than to receive. Giving and serving makes you happy. It gets you out of your own head. You end up rubbing shoulders with people you probably would have never rubbed shoulders with. Gives you a different perspective on life. Soften your heart so God can do his work. Then he says, not only will I dig around the tree and break up the hard soil and the hard hearts, I will then use some fertilizer. Some translations say manure. You guys know what manure is? Has a certain smell to it, doesn't it? Some of you may not know what it definitely has a smell to it. Some of you may not know what manure is. How about dung? Some translations say the vine dresser puts dung around the tree. Okay, you guys don't like that word either. Well, let me just say a word that I know the younger children could relate to. Poop. Has anyone ever said poop from the pulpit before? Is that even allowed? I'll find out shortly, huh? Thank you, Joe. He said, let me put poop around the tree. Maybe if I put poop around the tree, then it'll produce fruit. Does your life stink? I mean, seriously, is there ever a point in your life and a season you've been through, maybe there's a particular year that really stands out to you and say, you know what, that time in my life really stunk. Or maybe that's now. Hardships happen. Trauma happens in our lives. Pain, happens. Tragedy, misfortune, sickness, financial issues, they happen. Relationships dissolve. It happens. And when these things occur, we often feel, man, my life really stinks right now. I will say what seems to be a nuisance may actually be nutrients. Amen? Could it be that poop, it's like my fourth time saying it, produces fruit? I mean, somebody cracked the code, didn't they? They were understanding that you put something on there that stinks, something you probably don't want to touch, but it's beneficial. Let me ask a show of hands. How many of you came to Jesus in the midst of a tragedy? How many of you came to Jesus that your life was so broken, you were so down, that the only place you could look was up? There's a few of us out there. There's a lady in Mississippi. She was telling me a time where she had suffered through Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana. She was pregnant at the time, and she was a drug user. And she says it was that hurricane that brought her to Christ. She said her heart was jaded against humanity. She didn't trust. She didn't want to bother with any relationship. Her heart was hardened against the world and against God. She told me she was an atheist. But she said it was through Hurricane Katrina that she saw and experienced the love of humanity. And you know who stepped in her life? A member of the Lord's church. And they connected her with other members of the Lord's church and moved her from Louisiana, rescued her from Louisiana to Mississippi, and she found her way to the Bypass Church of Christ. And she told me, she said, if it wasn't for the hurricane, I would have never given my life to Christ. One more year. The vine dresser tells the vineyard owner, one more year. Jesus tells God, one more year. Let me work with this barren fig tree for one more year. The vine dresser agreed to do everything that he could for 1 year to help this fig tree produce fruit. Church, Jesus is our vine dresser. He is continually creating and manipulating our environment in hopes that we too will respond favorably to his grace, his love, his mercy, his kindness by doing what? Producing fruit. What does all this imply about Christ and about God in relation to us? If we are the fig tree, that God is close. He's close to us. Breaking up soil, adding fertilizer, they're up close efforts. You don't do this from a distance. I mean, this is really about God's care for us. Amen? This is really about God wanting us to be saved and to have a home with him in heaven. And it's not easy. The process is difficult. It's painful. It smells. But it's for our benefit. This is what Jesus was trying to get the Jews to understand. The reason that they were still alive wasn't to point the finger and say, look at the sins of the Galileans. Look how wicked and evil they are. Jesus is saying, don't focus on that. They're dead. What they've done in their life is not of importance to you. What you need to focus on is your sin. Are you repenting? Are you bearing fruit? Their tree has been cut down. What are you doing with the life that God is still allowing you to live?